What's that sound? It's for amusement only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. So, I have a confession to make. I had mentioned that I wouldn't do another Search Disc podcast. Well, I kind of lied, but not really. I'll couch this in terms of anything. It's just top of mind because that's the biggest problem that I'm trying to correct on any of my games at the moment. So, I have a situation where I have to remove a disc from the game entirely in order to test conductivity between all rivets and their associated outputs. So, as I've attempted to describe before, and perhaps in this description it will make a bit more sense to those of you that are well trained in the digital realm, but every stepper has an input and an output. Let that sink in for a minute. So, there's something that drives every stepper and every unit in the game. And that stepper is also sending signals elsewhere in the game. So if you have a problem with the stepper, and it's not related to the spider gear, it's not related to the wiper arms, it's not related to the output circuitry itself, which you can test with jumpers and so forth. And it's not related to a break in the wire bundle, as tested with continuity testing. Then what are you left with? Well, you're left with the internal wiring, or a mechanical problem, or something going on with the rivets. Maybe some have come loose. Well, how do you check it? Normally, you would lean the disc back a bit and take a look. Most discs will pull out of the machine to some extent. They're all built with a bit of slack in the wiring so that you can make adjustments, inspect, and correct. But if you have to take something out to your workbench, or in my case, a work chair, then you have a bit of a job ahead of you. So, it all depends on the number of inputs and outputs on the unit that you're trying to pull out of the game. What I typically do is mark. Now, I'm not one who takes a ton of photos, and there are many who recommend doing so, and certainly photos don't hurt. But here's my problem with photos. I have several dozen wires that need to be disconnected and reconnected in exactly the same way that they came off. I can't rely on the wire colors. Maybe this game had been in a bar for 50 years. I just a crazy amount of time in an environment where there was a ton of tar floating through the air from cigarettes, cigars, what have you. So I can't rely on the wire color. These are cloth-wrapped wires, and the color becomes brown over time. That's basically, it just trends toward brown. I'm always incredibly excited when I pick up a new game and I can actually see the wire colors. It's a major coup in the troubleshooting arena. But the wire colors only get you so far. when you're looking at a stepper or other unit where you have at least 2 different orientations that you could put this unit back into the game with, then you got a problem when you go to connect the wires. If you plug them in backwards, then it's going to put some inputs on some output lines and vice versa. You don't want that. All kinds of just crazy behavior would result from doing that. So what I do is I mark. I'm one of those characters, I guess. I take masking tape, and as I desolder each wire, I stop, take the time to wrap the wire in masking tape, make a little flag flying off of the wire, make sure it's adhered appropriately to the nicotine, I mean the wire, and write what it is and what position it's for. So I will sometimes write the wire color that it's supposed to be based on its representation in the manual, but often I will write down non-specific directions. For example, first wire on the left, second wire on the left, and so forth. And if I have a unit where there are multiple stacks of wires, or wires that go around the corner, so to speak, then I will change my relative directions. When it comes time to reassemble, and this again is if I've taken a unit completely out and I don't have a second unit to swap in its place, then I just reference my tags. Now, I will also reference a photo if I've taken one. But I don't know if you've gathered from listening to me babble on daily about this stuff, but I'm the impatient sort. So I tend to want to get things corrected in the quickest way available, and honestly, stopping with greasy, tar-stained hands and referencing my phone or a computer or whatever in order to look at a photo is not incredibly helpful to me, especially because I tend to chronically be out of battery in whatever system that I'm looking in. So I think for me, this system works. For others, photos work, and, I'm sure for others there are other ways. This is just the way that I do it. Now, there's an exception to this rule, and that's if I'm swapping in a completely different unit in its place. So I'm replacing the original unit with a different one. So, for example, the fuse blocks, which I have to replace in double up in order to correct many of its odd erratic behavior, when I finally work up the courage to open my wallet for that huge $5 purchase, I will inevitably handle it this way. I desolder one wire at a time, resolder it to the new connection. I do the same thing for you solid state guys again. When I switch connectors, I do a single wire at a time, and I make sure to test the orientation of this connector after I plug in the first wire. Well, I test it before, but also after. So you folks who've done connector work can attest that that's a critical thing to do. Well, when I'm swapping units, I try to maintain the same mentality, and that's because it's easy to get mixed up when you are moving 8 or 10 or a dozen or more wires. And they're all the same gauge. They're all pretty much the same color of brown. So it's really easy to get mixed up. Now, I was working with a friend on a bingo, and while I was troubleshooting a problem in a different game, they changed the fuse block. Now, they did not follow this advice, and instead desoldered the entire fuse block and then soldered the new one in its place. Now, as I mentioned, there's some slack in a lot of the units so that you can pull them out of the machine. Well, there's slack at the fuse area as well. And what they didn't realize when they were resoldering was that they had gotten several of the wires mixed up. And so I go to turn the game on after making the correction to... I was working on the trip bank on the end of the door while they were doing that. So I go to turn the machine on, and it makes the most awful noise you've ever heard. And I said, that's not from the trip bank. That had to be from the fuse block. So I went and took a look, and took a look at the wire colors, and sure enough, several of them had been reversed. Now, this put coil voltage to lamps, and all kinds of really interesting behaviors were happening as soon as the power was applied. So, got that corrected, and then the game fired up. Now, some of the bulbs burned out, but, make an omelet, break a few eggs, something like that. I'm not sure. But at any rate, that's a good lesson, for anybody who's starting out in EM repair to learn. At least this works for me. Again, not everybody works the same way that I do. This is just the stuff that I do, and I certainly appreciate the way that I do it, because I get horribly confused if I try to do something in any way different. I've tried the photo method. As I mentioned, it's just not for me. So, at any rate, I've babbled on long enough about this, and hey, I only mentioned search disk right at the top of the cast. You didn't even know what I was talking about, did you? Could have been talking about score reels, could have been talking about credit units, I could have been talking about coin units. Who knows? Could have been anything. Alright, well, thank you again for joining me. My name again is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com, and you can listen to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, via RSS, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on our website, which is foramusementonly.libsyn.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.